Hey y'all, so today I am going to be answering your questions. So if you're joining me live, make sure to put your questions in the comments. If you're watching this on a replay and you have questions, put them in the comments as well. I do answer go back and watch those, okay? And it can it can make it to my monthly Q&A sessions. So I do these Q&As every single last Friday of the month. We're doing a Q&A. So please, if you have questions, put them in the comments. If you do not want to ask your questions in a public forum like YouTube or Facebook, feel free to send me a message, or you can also schedule a strategy session with me where you can ask me your questions in private. Everything you tell me in a strategy session is, of course, confidential. So feel free to do that as well. Hi, Benita. Hi, Binta. How are you? Thanks for joining. Good morning. Oh, I guess it's morning where you are. It just turned afternoon where I am. So also feel free to tell me where you're joining me from. Okay. Hi, Wilma. Good to see you. Thanks for joining me. All right. So remember, if you're joining me live and you have questions, ask me your questions because I want to answer them for you. So Q&A is for you. I do have questions that people ask ahead of time that I'm going to be answering. But really, if you're joining me live, just know your questions are going to get the priority. Okay. So ask away. Oh, Wilma, let me give you the number. So just check the comments and the number is going to be there. If you would like to schedule a strategy session with me, my office number is 508-443-1788. You can also go on my website and you can see my calendar and schedule right in there. You don't even have to call. You'll see exactly what days and times I'm available, and you can go ahead and schedule the call at any time that's available. Okay. So I'm putting the number in the chat. All right. All right. So let's get started. Like I said, I have questions. I have questions. I'm a paper person. I know I could have it on my computer, but I'm a paper person. So I like looking at paper. Excuse me. All right. So let's see. Oh, Binta has a question. Let's see. I received an RFE I-130 for more information to make decision. Do you think my green card will be waived? My green card will, I'm guessing your green card interview will be waived because I sent already an RFE for medical exam. Great question. So if you are able to send in more documentation, right? More documentation about your relationship. So the I-130 RFEs are really just about the relationship, not really whether you qualify for a green card. So I-130 is all about your relationship with your spouse. So if you are able to send in more documents of, showing that you two live together, right? Showing that you are building a life together, that you're presenting yourself as a couple to the world. This can be WhatsApp messages, this can be social media, right? Anything that you can think of, this is the time to send it in. It's better to send in more than less when it comes to these RFEs, because again, the goal is to get your interview waived. And if they're asking you for additional documents, the officer wants to waive your interview. Okay. They could have you come in for an interview and ask you all the questions, but if you can send them enough documents, they're most likely going to waive your interview. So send in the documents. And you can watch my video on types of documents to send in, because it will give you a more detailed list. Okay. But remember, anything showing that you two live together, this can be, getting mail at the same address, your medical records showing your address, his medical records showing their address, like things that you may not even think about, WhatsApp messages, calls to each other, things like that. Okay. Listen, we have used Snapchat, all of it, all of it can be beneficial as long as it shows your relationship. So good luck. And remember, the more you send in, the more the officer has to basically make a decision and waive your interview. Okay. All right. Wilma asks, my kids I-130 for my kids processing time ended since first week in July and then changed to case taking a bit longer than expected. What can I do? So when it comes to this, what you can do is a service request. So you can go on the USCIS website and do an e-request. So if your case is outside of normal processing time, you can do an e-request to basically say, excuse me, I'm still waiting. Nothing has happened in my case, and it's outside of the normal processing time. What's going on? USCIS will respond to you as long as it's outside of the normal processing time. They will respond to you and tell you, you know, we're going to make a decision soon, or, we're doing some background checks, and that's why we haven't made a decision yet. But they will give you some form of response, right? If there are any reasons that an expedite may be appropriate in your case, then I suggest doing also doing an expedite request. Okay, so what can you do? You can do a service request if it's outside of normal processing time, and you can do that right on the USCIS website. And if there's any emergency, humanitarian reason, financial hardship, things like that, you can also ask for an expedite request. Binta, you are so welcome. You are almost there. Okay, so just keep going. You are almost there. All right. So remember, if you're joining me live and you have questions, put them in the comments so that I can respond to them for you. While I wait for more questions to come in, you are welcome, Wilma. So glad I'm able to answer these questions for y'all today. So the next question kind of goes off of Wilma's question a little bit, and it goes to expedite requests. If I'm a US citizen and I'm pregnant, will this expedite my foreign fiance's visa so he can be here when I give birth? So there, you can make an expedite request. However, it has to fit into one of the categories that USCIS accepts for expedite requests. That's really the main thing. Is if it doesn't fit into these categories, they're not going to actually approve the expedite. So financial hardship, humanitarian, emergency, right? Those are really the ones that people are able to fit into. So in your situation, being pregnant on its own may not be enough for an officer to approve it. However, if you are able to tie the pregnancy to a financial hardship, so if you're not able to work, if let's say your doctor says, hey, you're not able to actually, you're going to be on bed rest, right? That's a financial hardship because now you can't work. Now you need your fiance to get here sooner rather than later to not only help you going through childbirth, but also financially in the process. So you just have to make sure, can you use your pregnancy? Yes. However, you have to make sure that it still fits within the categories that the immigration officers like to see. If your case is still at the I-129F stage with USCIS, just know your expedite request is going to be to USCIS. If it's already at the K1 visa stage with the embassy, your expedite request has to go to the embassy. So that's the key here. Because again, most of these, if the person you're filing for is outside of the US, it's going to be a two-part process. So the first part is with USCIS, the second part with the embassy. And if you expedite the first part, you need to also expedite the second part because the USCIS expedite does not transfer to the embassy. Okay. And let's see. Next question. My wife's, so this is a long one. I'm actually going to leave this one to the end because we have to talk about forms and household size and all of that. So let's go to the next question and then we'll come back to it. All right. How long is it taken for a visa to be approved for the spouse of a permanent resident in Nigeria? All right. So this is a big one, right? Everyone wants to know, how long is it going to take? Generally, it depends on the country. Nigeria happens to be a special case because not only did COVID stop interviews from happening, the Muslim ban that happened before COVID also stopped interviews from happening. So the backlog at the embassy in Nigeria is huge, huge. So if you are the spouse of, so if you are a permanent resident, right? Permanent resident, not citizen. If you are a permanent resident and you want to file for your spouse, right? Permanent resident wanting to file for your spouse, and the spouse is from Nigeria, you need to do that as soon as possible. You cannot wait, right? You cannot wait. You may think that, oh, you have time. No, you don't have time. Because the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take. So you must do it as soon as possible. So that's number one. Number two, you first have to apply for an I-130 with USCIS. So you need to look at the processing time for an I-130 with USCIS, which right now, if your case is at the National Benefit Center, they're saying it's going to take 15 months. Now, when you actually get your receipt notice, look at the service center at the bottom. So it may now be, California Service Center or Vermont or, Texas, right? Those are going to have a better processing time than the National Benefit Center. So keep that in mind as well when you're looking at it, because you need to know your specific service center. The typical range for an I-130 right now for US citizens is between a year to a year and a half to be approved. There's no reason that it can't be the same. There's no reason that's going to change for, let's say, permanent residents. However, what's going to really affect it? Like I said, Nigeria has major backlogs, not only for COVID, being closed during COVID, but also the Muslim ban. So the embassy is kind of, still trying to get back on its feet. Really still trying to get back on its feet. So they're processing cases from like 2020 that are getting interviews, and that's for US citizens. That's not even for permanent residents. So that's one issue that you need to look at, right? Is how long it's taking on that end, but also you need to pay attention to the visa bulletin, because even if you are able to get an interview, I hate being the bearer of bad news, but I have to tell you, even if you are able to get an interview in, let's say, like 6 months, as soon as your I-130 is approved, you get an interview. You need to look at the visa bulletin, because the embassy cannot actually issue you the visa, right? They can't issue your spouse the visa unless you filed your application before February 8th, 2019. February 8th, 2019 is when they're issuing these visas. So if you file after February 8th, 2019, your spouse is not getting an interview anytime soon because the embassy cannot actually approve the case anytime soon. So you are looking at quite some time. So based on the visa bulletin, if it stays on the same rate, you're looking at least what, 4 years for a visa to become available. And then the I-130 can take up to a year and a half. So that's 5 years to 5.5 years. Depending on how the embassy is scheduling cases, you may want to add another year to that. So you're looking at 5 to 6 years minimum, based on you having to go through an I-130 and waiting for a visa to become available. So that is, unfortunately, how long it will take for a permanent resident filing for a spouse. It's going to be faster, right, for a US citizen filing for a spouse, because for US citizens, their spouses are considered immediate relatives. And if your spouse is an immediate relative, you don't have to wait for a visa to become available. There is always a visa available for spouses of US citizens. So in this situation, if you haven't filed your I-130 yet, you may want to consider, if you have, if you're qualified to become a citizen, and go ahead and file for your citizenship while the I-1, and also file the I-130, so that once you become a citizen, you can update the I-130 to show that you are now a citizen, and your application will go from, spouse of a permanent resident to spouse of a US citizen, meaning you don't have to wait for a visa to become available in like 4 years. All right. So that's a way that you can still do it without having to wait as long. All right. Hi, Audrey. Thank you for joining me. If you have questions, please do put them in the comments. I am happy to respond. And while I'm waiting for more questions to come in, I'm going to go to the next question that was sent in ahead of time. How do I invite a friend or family member to come and visit me in the US? So I've gotten this question a lot. So people that are, have a medical condition or a medical treatment coming up, and they want family to come and help them through the healing process. Or they are giving birth and they want families to come to help them with the early stages of, just giving birth. Now, here's the thing with these types of visas. You are the person that you want to invite, the person that you want to come here to help you or to visit you, is the one that needs to qualify for a visa. You, the US citizen, you, the permanent resident that's living in the US, your invitation is like 1% of the whole picture, right? So the person that is trying to come needs to show that they have such a strong tie to their home country that they have no reason to want to stay in the US. And their reason for wanting to come to the US needs to make sense to the officer. And that's what people don't understand. Most people will be like, oh, I need to write this extensive, invitation letter. Some officers are not even going to look at any documents at the interview. You walk up, they ask you questions, and that's what they base their decision on. Okay? So it's so important that you understand that, yes, you can invite them, you can be the reason that they're coming to the US, but they themselves still need to qualify. So depending on the country as well, is going to be difficult to get a B1, B2 visa because the backlog is crazy. So for example, Nigeria is taking about 2 years to get an interview. Ghana, I believe, is about a year to get an interview. So it really does matter. And the planning matters as well. So let's say, for example, you're trying to bring someone here, but there's no visa available, right? They can't get an interview. And you're already given their reason for wanting to come now no longer exists. Now you have to, now it's just a visit. The ones that we have successfully done for people trying to have family members come and help them after childbirth is if it's a cultural thing. There's a cultural component of mothers or mothers-in-laws coming to help with the first few months of after the baby is here. So for example, in Nigeria, I'm Igbo, so we have something called Omo. It's basically where the mother, if the mother is no longer there, the mother-in-law will come and stay with the family and basically take care of the baby while the mother recovers. That is a thing, and it's part of the culture. Now, yes, it's part of the culture, but there's an additional component. If there is, a medical reason why it's necessary, a medical reason why it's necessary for the mother to come or for help to come, you need to state that. Okay? If there is a reason, there's a medical reason. So, for example, if the person just gave birth and they had complications and they have other children to take care of and their spouse is not able to take care of them because they still have to work to maintain the household, that may be a situation where you can use the pregnancy to get an appointment faster. So you can request for visiting visa appointments to be expedited, but again, it has to be based on something, right? The expedite has to be based on some form of emergency. The visa also, especially if the person doesn't have a lot of ties to their home country, they don't have a lot of things going on, they can still get the visa. You just have to document the proof, right? And they have to be ready to answer questions at the interview. Because again, most officers at these visa interviews do not check your documents. You can come with stacks and stacks of bank statements and things like that. They are not encouraged or required to look at the documentation. They are actually discouraged from looking at documentation because they have so many interviews to get through that it just doesn't make sense for them to sit there and look at every single paper you bring to them. Okay, so preparing for the interview is really the key with these. So that's my long way of saying, yes, you can invite them and they can apply for a B1, B2 visa, but they need to qualify at all times for that visa. Okay, so the next question is, one second. This is one of my favorite ones. It is taking forever to get the documents required to get married for the country where my fiance lives. Can we get married in another country? Yes. So sometimes you are in a situation where, the country may require a bunch of documentation, proof that you've never been married, statements, things like that. And you just are not there physically in the country to do the things that they're asking, or it's going to take like 6 months. And you don't want to wait 6 months for all those processes to be done. And you want to get married right away. In that situation, you have options. If you and your fiance can go to another country and get married there, legally get married there, that counts. That counts. Okay. if you are able to travel to your fiance's country, but you're not able to get married there, well, let's talk about a little state called Utah. Okay. So Utah has an online marriage, right? You can get married online. It doesn't matter where you are in the US or outside of the US. So if you are in the US and your fiance is in, I'm just going to keep using Nigeria because that's where I'm from. And listen, it is what it is. So let's say you're in the US, your fiance is in Nigeria. You get married online in Utah, right? You sign up, you put all the information, they schedule you. Typically, it's like less than 2 weeks, you can get married through the online marriage thing. It can count for immigration purposes if and only if you can prove that you and your spouse, now spouse, consummated your marriage. USCIS don't want to know if you two have sex or not. Don't worry. But you need to show that you two were in the same place at the same time. And the way you can prove this is with traveling to where your spouse lives, you two going on a honeymoon together to a specific country and documenting that. So even though you weren't able to get married based on the system where your fiance lives, you're still able to do it online with the state of Utah, and you can just have to prove that you saw each other after you got married. Okay. And you have to see each other after you got married before you file an I-130. Okay. That's the process. You get married online, you see each other in person, and then you file the I-130, and that marriage will be accepted by USCIS. It's called a proxy marriage. Okay. A proxy marriage is accepted as long as you can prove that you consummated the marriage. Just show that you two were in the same place at the same time and you're fine. Okay. If you are joining me and you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I am more than happy to respond. And if you are getting value out of this, please go ahead and like this video. It just helps YouTube and Facebook share this with people that may benefit from it. So I would appreciate that. Let's continue. So the next one is, I'm a US citizen. My son derived citizenship from me once I became a citizen. Do I need to apply for a certificate of citizenship, or is the passport enough? So yes, the passport can be enough. However, I always recommend getting a certificate of citizenship just so you have an additional proof of citizenship. So if let's say your child loses their passport, they go to apply for a new one, they may be able to renew it. However, while they're applying for a new one, they are not able to renew their license to show any sort of proof that they are still a US citizen. So the passport is proof of citizenship. The certificate of citizenship is also proof of citizenship, but it's one of those proofs that doesn't expire. You usually have it in a place where you don't lose it as often as a passport. And your child will always have documentation with USCIS of their citizenship. Okay. A US passport is issued by the Department of State, not the Department of Homeland Security. Okay. Let me say that again. US passport is issued by US Department of State, not US Department of Homeland Security. USCIS is under Department of Homeland Security. ICE is under Department of Homeland Security. So to make sure that your child is secure in their citizenship, make sure that you not only not only get them a US passport, but you also get them a certificate of citizenship. And if you are only going to get them a passport, please, for the love of God, go to the Social Security office and update their Social Security number and account to show that they are now a US citizen. Please do that. Because if there's no record, if you never go to Social Security and update it, Social Security has no record of your child ever being a citizen. Okay? So if you're going to get passport, update the Social Security so that they always have a record of him being a citizen. However, I always recommend also getting the certificate of citizenship because it's a forever proof that they are a US citizen. Okay? Next question. Let's see. So this is the long one that I want to read for y'all, and then we'll talk about it together. My wife's mother is living with us while we file the I-130, I-485, etc. for the green card application plus adjustment of status, which is the same thing. I am reading the instructions, and I still don't get who to include as part of the household. My mother-in-law plus my wife equals 2. My entire family plus my mother-in-law equals 5. If A, it makes incomes, assets, and liabilities harder to answer because my wife and I share all of these. From your video, I would think B would probably be the better answer, but I don't see myself or our kids falling into the categories listed on the instruction sheet. All right, let's get into it. When you are doing household size, right, it is whoever you live with and also support. So if you're filing taxes, who are you claiming on your tax return? Whoever you're claiming on your tax return is part of your household. So if you're claiming your mother-in-law as part of your household when you're filing taxes, then they are included as part of your household. If they are just living in the house, they're not necessarily part of your household. So if they're working and taking care of themselves, yeah, they live there, but they are a separate, household, right? So you can treat her as a roommate, then, part of your family in this situation. So household is you, your spouse, your children that live with you or that you claim on your taxes. So even if they don't live with you, but you claim them on your taxes, they're part of your household. So that's where, so there's a C. So there's an A, my mother-in-law plus my wife, B, my entire family plus my mother-in-law, or C, just my entire family minus mother-in-law. C. That's what I would do if, and only if, your mother-in-law is not claimed on your taxes. If your mother-in-law is claimed on your taxes, they are part of your household. All right. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. I hope you're getting value out of these. Like I said, I love this. This is kind of this is why I do what I do. So you can ask me questions and we can get you some information. All right. All right. So let's see. Audrey has a question. I-130 and I-485 approval letter was received after interview 2 weeks ago. Until now, I don't receive yet my card. That's normal. I'm sorry, but that is normal. Typically within a month of the approval, you will get your card. But it is normal. Check your USCIS online account, or check the case status. That's where you will see where things are. So if it just says case is approved, that means they haven't actually printed the card yet. Eventually, it will change from case is approved to card is produced, or and then finally it was sent to you, right? So check the, so before you call, I know you say, how can I do call USCIS or just wait? You can wait, but while you're waiting, go ahead and check the case status and see if it just says case approved. If it just says case approved, it just means they haven't, the place that prints the cards haven't actually started printing the card yet. Okay, so even though the officer approved it, they don't print the cards there. There's a third party that actually prints the green cards. So they still have to send it over to them, and they have to basically print them in the order they receive it. So that may be the reason as well. But typically within a month, there should be an update in there. If there's not, then you can contact USCIS. All right. And like I said, just check the case status. If the case status said that the card was sent to you, but you haven't received it after like a few weeks, after a week or two, you can also do an e-request on the USCIS.gov online and tell them that you didn't receive your card. And they typically would send you, basically reissue it or try to figure out where it went. All right. Let's see. I think I have, oh, I have one more question. Like, I know I'm missing something. I have one more question. What is the process of adopting a child from Ghana? So this is a question that I got recently in another situation. So I have answers. I have answers. Ghana is part of the Hague Convention. If you want to adopt a child that is not in the US, you need to look at whether the child lives in a Hague Convention country. Okay? Hague Convention signatories as far as adoption is concerned, because there's different Hague Conventions. You just want to make sure they're signed to the adoption one. And you can find that out on the State Department's website. Ghana just happens to be part of the Hague Convention. This happened within the past like 5 years. So if you had an adoption process in Ghana, let's say like 10 years ago, it's completely different now. Okay, it's different. So you have to go through the Hague Convention process. The first step in the Hague Convention process is getting an adoption service provider. And your adoption service provider is going to be your main contact and service provider in the whole process. So they not only help you with the US end of doing a home study, getting the paperwork together as far as like what's required for an adoption, but they also help you on the other end, depending on the country where the child is, with connecting with an adoption agency over there and doing whatever the process is. If you have already identified the child that you want to adopt, if it's someone that is, let's say, a family member passed away and their child is there and you want to adopt them, you still have to go through an adoption service provider. Okay, that is non-negotiable. Okay, that is non-negotiable when it comes to Hague Convention countries. If, let's say, you want to adopt a child in Nigeria, you only have to go through an adoption service provider if you want to go through if they are considered an orphan. So if the child meets the requirements to be categorized as an orphan, you still have to go through an adoption service provider. All right. However, in a country like Nigeria, you have the option of also residing, having legal and physical custody of the child for 2 years. And then you can just file a regular I-130 for the child. Okay. But you have to prove that you had that residency with the child. If the child you're adopting is from a, let's use Ghana, right? Ghana is part of the Hague Convention. But if you are not a US citizen, if you are a permanent resident, you don't have to go through the Hague Convention process. However, if you want the child to be categorized as an orphan, you basically still have to kind of go through the Hague Convention process by having an adoption service provider. So, not every single adoption service provider handles adoption in all the countries. Okay. There's adoption service providers that will tell you that, oh, yes, we do, let's say, for example, we take cases for Ghana, and then some will tell you we don't take cases for Ghana. So it's really important that you not only look at whether you need to go through a Hague Convention process, but also make sure that when you're working with a service provider, that they actually can work with that country, because some service providers are banned in certain countries, and then there's countries that do not allow adoptions at all. Okay, so but your service provider will be able to tell you that, right? I believe in the past few years that I looked at it, it was like Kenya is one of the ones that do not allow adoptions at this time, because they just had a few incidents and they were not happy with what happened with the children that were adopted. So they just cut it off. So if you're not a Kenyan citizen, you're not able to adopt a child from Kenya. At least since the last time I looked. So it's really important that you know whether you are whether you need an adoption service provider as you're going through the process. And then once you are approved to adopt a child, the service provider will work with the agency in the country and make sure they get all the court part of it completed, so that you can actually then file for the child to come to the US and become a green card holder and automatically become citizen. Okay. And remember, the child must be under the age of 16. So if they're already 16, you cannot do an adoption for immigration purposes. If they are 15, you need to hurry up, because once they turn 16, it's over. Okay, the adoption needs to be final by the time that they are before they are 16. So that's tick. That's the time that you need to really focus on. Okay. All right. So those are all the questions I have in front of me. So if you have questions, put them in the comments. If you are watching this on the replay, put your questions in the comments. I am more than happy to respond to them and to add them to next month's Q&A session. Next month's Q&A session is going to be the week before Thanksgiving weekend. I'm sorry. I love y'all, but I am not. I'm going to be spending time with my family the Friday after Thanksgiving. So it's going to be the week before that. So the 18th, of course, I will let you know once I go live, but just know it's not going to be the last Friday of the month for this month, for November or December, because again, holiday, I'm away. And also, if you have questions, put them in the comments. I'm still here for a little bit. All right. So I think those are the announcements I have as far as the lives are concerned. If you would like to speak with me privately, have a strategy session, you can do that by going to my website. These are for people that are looking to get green cards or citizenships for themselves or their families, and they just want to know what the next step is, if they qualify, what what you can actually achieve. Go ahead and schedule that strategy session. I will be able to go through your history, ask you some questions, and see if you actually qualify. And if you do, we can then discuss how we can work together moving forward. So that's the purpose of the strategy session, for you to ask me questions. And as always, your questions to me during the strategy session is confidential. So your information is always confidential. So if you don't feel comfortable asking here, schedule that. The link is in the description to the video, and you can also go to my website, lilylegal.com, and schedule your strategy session right on there. And the best part about going to my website to schedule it is that you can see exactly when I'm available and just pick the time that works for you. Okay. I know some people will call and we'll try to, figure out what time works best. But this way you can have your calendar in front of you, see what time I'm available, see what time you're available, and pick the time that works for you. All right. And as always, I represent people from all over the US and all over the world, if we're being honest. US immigration is everywhere. So we work with people from everywhere, and we do phone, video, in person. We try to make it as accessible for you as possible. So that's my spiel. And also remember, I have more videos that you can watch that basically goes through the process of guests. So go ahead and watch those, and I will see you next week with more Immigration Live. Okay. And if you have questions, bring them to the lives every single Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern time, and we get to answer your questions. Okay. All right. I will see you next time. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining.